The air inside the Great Pyramid of Giza was still and heavy, carrying the weight of thousands of years. Dr. Nadia El-Taib wiped the sweat from her brow as she followed her team through the narrow passageway, their flashlights illuminating the dust-laden walls covered in familiar hieroglyphs. The excavation had already yielded incredible finds, but nothing could have prepared her for what lay ahead. "Here," said Tariq, one of the younger archaeologists, his voice echoing in the confined space. "This wall, it doesn't match the others." Nadia stepped forward and examined the stone surface. Unlike the rest of the chamber, which was adorned with meticulously carved inscriptions, this section was unnaturally smooth. No hieroglyphs. No marks of chisels. It was as if the stone had been placed there not by human hands but by something far more advanced. Professor Julian Carter, an expert in ancient engineering, joined them, running his hands over the surface. "This isn't limestone like the rest of the pyramid. It feels almost metallic." Tariq pressed his hand against the wall. A deep, vibrating hum resonated through the chamber. Then, without warning, the wall shifted, splitting down the middle with a mechanical precision that no ancient structure should have possessed. A gust of stale air rushed out from the opening, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then Nadia turned on her flashlight and stepped inside. The hidden chamber was vast, far larger than any of them had anticipated. The walls were covered in symbols, but they were not the usual hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt. These carvings seemed alive, shifting ever so slightly when viewed from different angles, as though responding to their presence. And at the center of the room stood the obelisk. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Towering at least 15 feet tall, the structure was made of an unidentifiable metal, dark yet shimmering, as though it absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. The obelisk pulsed faintly, a golden hue traveling along its surface like a slow heartbeat. A machine. Not of this world. Nadia's pulse quickened. This was not just another burial chamber. It was something older, something meant to be found only when the time was right. And they had just activated it. The team worked quickly, setting up cameras, scanners, and equipment to document the chamber. The obelisk stood silently as if it were waiting for something. Nadia approached cautiously, her heart hammering in her chest. She reached out, fingertips grazing the cool metal. The obelisk came to life. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. The carvings on the walls began to shift, rearranging themselves into new patterns. The air vibrated, and a golden light spread from the obelisk, illuminating the room in an eerie glow. Then, the machine began to write. On the walls, symbols materialized, etched by some invisible force. Hieroglyphs formed in rapid succession, lines and patterns weaving into place with precision that no human hand could replicate. Nadia stumbled back. It's processing something." Julian was already recording. "This isn't writing," he said breathlessly. "This is data." Tariq stared at the inscriptions. "But what is it processing? And from where?" The answer came in the form of a pulse, an electromagnetic wave so strong it shut down every electronic device in the chamber. The lights flickered out. The air grew thick with energy. And then the walls moved. A section of hieroglyphs twisted, reconfiguring into something new. The symbols now formed a single phrase. "The Eternal Scribe awakens." Nadia's breath caught in her throat. The obelisk was not merely a machine, it was translating something, converting some cosmic stream of information into human language. But whose information? And more importantly, who was meant to read it? By morning, the Egyptian authorities had been alerted, and the entire pyramid had been sealed off. Only a select few were allowed inside: government officials, scientists, and military personnel. The discovery of an advanced machine within one of humanity's oldest monuments was not something to be taken lightly. Julian studied the inscriptions that continued to appear on the walls. He had deciphered a few recurring patterns, but their meanings remained unclear. The only certainty was that the obelisk was receiving information from an external source. "Transmission," he murmured. Nadia looked up. "From where?" Julian hesitated before responding. "Not Earth." The idea was staggering. The machine was connected to something off-world, receiving and converting messages into hieroglyphs. But if the obelisk was meant to be deciphered by humans, that meant Someone had left it here for them. That night, Nadia sat alone in the chamber, staring at the walls now covered in the scribe's inscriptions. She traced her fingers over one particular phrase, a sense of unease creeping into her mind. They are watching. A shiver ran down her spine. Had their activation of the scribe alerted something? Days passed, and the obelisk continued its work, translating cosmic data streams into messages that grew increasingly urgent. The time is near. The vessel will be chosen. The gate will open. The world took notice. News of the discovery leaked to the media, sparking wild theories. Some believed it was proof of ancient aliens. Others feared it was a doomsday prophecy. Governments scrambled to contain the information, but it was already too late. Then the incident happened. It started with the tremors. A deep, resonant vibration shook the pyramid, knocking over equipment. The obelisk pulsed violently, its glow intensifying. Security cameras captured a moment of pure impossibility. One of the hieroglyphs moved, shifting across the wall as though it were a living entity. Then the scribe wrote its final message. The vessel is chosen. The moment the words appeared, Nadia collapsed. When she woke, the first thing she noticed was the silence. The obelisk had stopped. The walls were still. The chamber, once alive with shifting inscriptions, had gone dark. And yet, something had changed. She understood. Somehow, in a way she couldn't explain, the knowledge of the scribe was now inside her. She was the vessel. And whatever was coming, whatever the obelisk had been preparing for, was already on its way. The moment Nadia awoke, she knew she was no longer the same. Her mind was a storm of symbols and equations, entire passages of hieroglyphs flashing through her thoughts faster than she could process them. It was as if the knowledge of the Eternal Scribe had been downloaded into her, a direct infusion of something ancient, something not human. She sat up, gasping for breath. Around her, the other scientists stared in a mix of awe and fear. The obelisk stood silent, its glow now a dull ember, as if whatever power it once held had transferred into her. Nadia? Julian's voice was cautious. Are you okay? She turned to him, her lips moving before she could even think. Words, no, symbols, poured out in a voice not entirely her own. HKANBW, Ake Rinpet. The moment the words left her mouth, the walls reacted. The inscriptions began shifting again, reorganizing themselves into structured passages. It was as if the scribe had been waiting for someone to speak the words aloud. What did you say? Julian asked, stepping closer. Nadia swallowed, the meaning of the phrase sinking into her mind even as she spoke it. The golden truth, the dawn of the new age. A new age of what? She didn't know yet. But something inside her did. And it was waking up. 2 days after the incident at the pyramid, reports started coming in. In the Amazon rainforest, archaeologists at an ancient temple reported strange phenomena. Glowing carvings had emerged overnight on stone walls, eerily identical to the inscriptions inside the Great Pyramid. At the Vatican, hidden chambers beneath St. Peter's Basilica were found to contain hieroglyphs, despite the fact that no Egyptian influence had ever been recorded there. And then there was the signal. NASA intercepted it first, an anomaly originating from somewhere beyond the Kuiper Belt. A frequency so faint it had been dismissed as background radiation until now. But when the data was analyzed, it revealed something impossible. The same symbols that the Eternal Scribe had been etching on the pyramid walls. Someone or something was broadcasting them. And humanity had just tuned in. Look at this, Julian said, shoving a printout of the intercepted signal toward Nadia. She barely needed to glance at it. She recognized it immediately. It's a lexicon, she murmured, tracing her fingers over the symbols. A structured system of communication. A language. A language from where? Colonel Isaac Vaughn demanded. The room had become a war room. Egyptian officials, military leaders, intelligence agents, they were all here now, drawn to the pyramid like moths to a flame. The Eternal Scribe was no longer just an archaeological find. It was a national security threat. Not from Earth, Nadia said. That much is clear. Vaughn scoffed. So what, this is alien? Not alien, she corrected. Ancient. This language isn't new. It's been here for thousands of years, embedded in our oldest symbols, waiting for us to recognize it. Whoever built the scribe, they were here long before us. The room fell silent. Julian broke it. Why not? Why is the scribe reacting? Why is it sending signals? Nadia exhaled. Because it's translating something happening right now. The message is new, but the system for understanding it has always been here. We just weren't ready before. Ready for what? Vaughn pressed. She turned to him, feeling the weight of the answers settle in her chest. Their return. The transmissions from the Eternal Scribe became more urgent. Each day, the inscriptions changed, forming more complex messages, warnings, maps, instructions. But instructions for what? Nadia worked tirelessly, decoding, transcribing. The language, this language of the gods, was rewriting itself in her mind, guiding her hands even when she wasn't conscious of it. Then one night she dreamed. She was standing on an endless black desert, the sky above her filled with spiraling golden lights. Shadows loomed in the distance, tall, thin, their bodies shifting like liquid metal. They had no faces, yet she knew they were looking at her. The vessel is chosen, they whispered. The gate will open. She woke with a start, her pulse racing. And the next morning, the scribe had inscribed a single new message onto the chamber walls. The architects return. Prepare the vessel. The vessel is you, Nadia, Julian said quietly. She shook her head. I don't know what that means. It means, Vaughn cut in, that we don't have time to sit around guessing. If something's coming, we need to be ready. Ready for what? What? If necessary. Nadia clenched her fists. The scribe wasn't built as a weapon. It was built to teach. To guide. And if I'm the vessel, then I need to understand what it's trying to show me before we assume we need to start shooting at something we don't understand. Vaughn studied her for a long moment. You have 48 hours. She turned back to the inscriptions, feeling the weight of every second. Something huge was happening, and humanity was running out of time to figure out what it was. The moment the final message appeared on the walls, the sky changed. Over the Great Pyramid, a golden spiral of light formed, its edges shimmering like heat waves. All across the world, ancient sites reacted, Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat, Chichen Itza. A pattern. A network waking up. And then, the sky split open. From the spiraling light, shapes began to emerge, not ships, not creatures, but something else entirely. Structures? Beings? They shimmered, shifting between dimensions, flickering in and out of existence. Julian's voice trembled. Are those? Nadia knew what they were before he could finish the question. The architects. They had returned. And the final inscription on the walls told humanity exactly what came next. The path forward is yours to choose. The sky over Giza burned with golden light. The massive, spiraling rift shimmered above the Great Pyramid, pulsing in rhythm with the ancient obelisk inside the hidden chamber. From the anomaly, they emerged, beings neither solid nor fluid, neither here nor elsewhere. Their forms were indistinct, shifting between towering humanoid figures and radiant geometric constructs, as if their existence defied the very nature of reality. The architects had returned, and the world held its breath. Military forces across the globe mobilized, missiles primed, fighter jets soaring through the air. But nothing they had could compare to the sheer presence of these entities. These were not invaders. These were the creators of the very knowledge humanity had only begun to understand. Nadia El-Tayyib stood at the entrance of the pyramid, her heart pounding in her chest. The language of the Eternal Scribe pulsed in her mind, filling her with understanding she hadn't possessed moments before. They do not come for war, she whispered. They come for judgment. Colonel Vaughn stepped beside her, his radio crackling with messages from military leaders worldwide. Judgment? What? Nadia turned her gaze to him, eyes distant, as if she were listening to something beyond human perception. Of whether humanity is worthy of the knowledge left for us. Julian Carter approached, gripping a tablet showing a new transmission. The obelisk had resumed its work. More hieroglyphs were appearing on the walls. New message, he said, voice unsteady. The symbols rearranged themselves, forming a phrase that sent a chill through everyone in the chamber. The weighing of the world has begun. The phrase was a direct reference to Ma'at, the ancient Egyptian principle of balance and truth. In mythology, a soul's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at to determine its fate in the afterlife. But this was not about a single soul. This was about Earth itself. This is a test, Nadia said, realization dawning. A final judgment. Not of our strength, but of our wisdom. Of whether we've used the knowledge they left us for creation or destruction. Bond scoffed. We've been at war with ourselves for millennia. You think we're going to pass? The architects, still hovering above the pyramid, began to speak. It was not a sound. It was a vibration, an energy that rippled through the very air, bypassing ears and resonating directly in the minds of every living being on the planet. Their message came in every language, every dialect, every mind at once. The time has come. Humanity stands at the crossroads of ruin and enlightenment. The weight of your existence is measured. Your fate shall be determined. The words sent a shockwave across the world. People collapsed, overwhelmed by the sheer gravity of the message. Governments scrambled for solutions. Were they to surrender? Negotiate? What do they want from us? Julian muttered. Nadia's breath trembled. They want to see who we really are. Then the architects revealed the truth. They had been watching Earth for thousands of years, not as gods, nor as invaders, but as guardians of knowledge. The Eternal Scribe was never meant to be a mere machine. It was a bridge between civilizations, a test to see if humanity could rise beyond its nature. But the test was almost over. The weighing had begun. The architects sent visions to all of humanity, moments of our history flashing before every mind on Earth. Wars, genocide, greed. But also love, discovery, sacrifice. The best and worst of human nature displayed in an instant. And then came the final trial. A countdown appeared in the sky, visible to all. 24 hours. In that time, humanity would be judged. If the scales tipped toward destruction, the architects would erase everything, not in war, not with weapons, but with something far more terrifying. They would simply take back the knowledge they had given. Every advancement tied to their influence, architecture, mathematics, medicine, technology, would vanish. Humanity would be sent back to the Stone Age. Unless they could prove themselves worthy. Panic erupted across the globe. Protests, riots, prayers. The wealthiest fled to bunkers. Governments debated striking first, but against what? The true battle was not against the architects. It was against themselves. Humanity has one day to prove that knowledge was not given in vain, Nadia said. Not to destroy. Not to conquer. But to create. To build. To elevate. But how? Then an idea sparked. If knowledge is what they weigh, then let's show them what we've learned, Julian said. Let's share it. Not with them, but with ourselves. Let's do what we were meant to do. A global broadcast was initiated. Scientists, historians, philosophers, teachers, people from every field began sharing everything. Medical breakthroughs once hoarded by corporations were released to the public. Energy solutions kept secret for political control were exposed. Technology once reserved for the elite was distributed freely. A moment of pure human unity. A moment where knowledge was no longer controlled, but given freely. A moment where, for the first time in history, humanity acted not for power, but for progress. And as the final hour approached, the architects watched. The golden spiral above Giza pulsed one final time. The countdown reached 0. And the world stood still. For what felt like eternity, nothing happened. Then the architects moved. They descended. Not as conquerors, not as gods, but as something else. Messengers. With a single touch of their luminous hands, the obelisk inside the pyramid changed. Its surface, once dark, turned golden, shining with the brilliance of 1,000 suns. The inscriptions expanded beyond the chamber walls, stretching across the entire pyramid, then beyond, spreading across the earth in an instant, imprinting their message into the very planet itself. And then they spoke. The weight has been lifted. The earth trembled, but it was not destruction. It was renewal. The Eternal Scribe had completed its task. The architects had decided. Humanity would not be erased. It had passed. And in its passing, it had ascended. The architects left as they came, vanishing into the rift. The golden spiral collapsed, the sky returning to normal. But the world was forever changed. The Eternal Scribe had gifted humanity its final lesson. Knowledge was never meant to be hoarded. It was meant to be shared. And now, with the weight of the past lifted, humanity stood at the threshold of a new era. Not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as architects of their own destiny. And so, beneath the ancient pyramids, where history had begun, a new future was written.